Hello, welcome to IP Voices, an international interview series highlighting the leaders shaping the world's most influential brands and innovations. And I'm really happy to be joined by Renee Kraft, who is Chief Trademark Counsel at Target, where she spent, I think, the last 14 years, more or less. And before that, worked at Fulbright and Jaworski, now Norton Rose Fulbright, as a trademark counsel. Thank you so much, Renee, for joining today from Sample, Minnesota, right? Near Minneapolis, where
Yeah.
a lot has been going on. So I hope you're all okay and things are better now, right?
Yeah, things are starting to calm down, but happy to be here with you and looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, you've supported well-known brands throughout your career. Can you give us a flavor of the brands and innovation that you have supported? And also, what pulled you into this field?
Yeah, sure. So I've been super fortunate to represent a lot of Fortune 500 companies, so a lot of big brands. Some fields more interesting than others, but I've done insurance, I've done healthcare, I've done a lot of retail. Obviously, right now working at Target, and that's my main focus is retail, supporting a lot of apparel, home, grocery brands. So that's been very interesting to see it from the inside. And what brought me to IP? So this is sort of an interesting story. It goes way back to a picture of 17-year-old me. I used to be in beauty pageants back in the day. So I was Miss St. Francis. And back in the day when they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said that I wanted to be a trademark attorney for a large retailer in Minnesota, specifically Target. And here I am. So I sort of manifested this career for myself from a young age. I think I got that inspiration partially because Target is such a really good community member in Minnesota, really well-known, well-rooted community company. So had a lot of respect for the brand even back then. And then in high school, I was on the debate team and we had a topic about China and, some of the issues with China and intellectual property. And that got me thinking about those issues and really interested in how to kind of get more involved in that as I got older. And so even going into high school and college, already looking at some IP, specifically international IP. So it goes way back for me.
Target was one of my favorite store when I used to live in the US. I used to go there all the time. It was really a favorite of ours.
As a hometown brand, it's always kind of, you have these well-known brands that are right in your
Super
backyard.
well known. So what do you find actually the most rewarding about operating, which I think we operate as IP lawyers, right, at the intersection of creativity, business, and law. So what do you find the most rewarding about that?
Yeah, well, especially since going in-house and working within the brand to kind of see how the process goes from just an initial grain of a thought of what we might accomplish to the whole creative process, the consumer research, bringing the brand to life, doing all the guest testing. Seeing that from start to finish has been really interesting. And then also how it plays outside of the US, right? So you start with a brand in the US and you've got a US based customer, but then, you're bringing it outside of the US. It's a different customer base. They might have, different wants and needs. They might look at the brand differently. And just seeing how that translates on an international stage is interesting. I really appreciate that it's not so serious. It's, there's the contract and the legal risk and licensing and all those things that have to have their T's crossed and I's dotted, but there's a little bit of fun with it too. And the creativity, I can take my lawyer hat off sometimes and put on the creative hat and help the business solve problems that way.
Yes, this is great. Before we go further into more the IP questions, what's one non-legal influence, maybe a book, maybe some art or film, that really inspires you and maybe also inspires who you are and how you work?
Yeah. I mean, again, going way back, one of my favorite shows in college was Ally McBeal, which for people that don't know, it was a legal drama, we'll say, with some absurd kind of premises. They always had like these ridiculous situations that they would find themselves in. But it was this law firm and they had a really unique way of working together. It wasn't your traditional hierarchical law firm with, the partners and the associates. It was like a very collaborative environment and everybody working together to solve these crazy cases that they were working on, I think just showed me early on that you can have fun within the law, and just working in a collaborative environment, which really fit my personality, right? So the partners there were working with the associates and everybody was kind of on this even playing field. And I really think I bring that to my work now, working with the paralegals that I have on my team and like a really close collaborative mentoring relationship, working across different lawyers within the department, working in this collaborative, creative, and problem solving type of manner. I've really tried to bring that to my work. And I think that that fits my natural personality really well.
I can say, at least having worked with you, I totally can vouch for that. And what does it take so then to be seen as a creative business partner? I mean, I think naturally your personality might be quite open to that, but based on your experience, what advice or tips can you give to others in terms of building this kind of business relationship?
I think you just can't always come back with no. I mean, I think there's a myth or at least a perception, especially amongst marketing and creative types that, lawyers are very buttoned up and serious and you're going to go to them and they're going to tell you no. And it doesn't really matter what you come up with. There's always going to be a problem. It takes time to develop those relationships, but to let your business partners know that you're just that you're a partner. You're not there to be, like, yes, no. It's more of a here's what the business is trying to accomplish. Here are the legal parameters around it. How can we work within that legal framework to come up with the best solution for the business? And that does take some creativity. In order to give good legal advice, you need to get people to come to you with their questions. And if they're worried that you're not going to be a good partner or you're not going to, you're going to be too rigid and not work with them to come up with solutions, they're not going to want to come to you. And then sometimes it's too late to be a good influence or, you are in a position where you have to say no and don't have time to come up with a good solution. So I
Yeah.
think developing those relationships early on, and letting them know that they can come to you, it'll be a conversation and you can have, maybe some creative ideas yourself. Like, just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you're not also creative. And sometimes, you can have good input into the creative process as well. I like to think at the end of the day, when you have a good legal discussion, the first idea that you come up with as a creative person might not actually be the best. And if there's a legal risk because some other people are doing it, then maybe it's not the most creative solution, right? And there's maybe a better alternative that's more unique and more ownable, that you wouldn't get to if you didn't have that legal counsel. So hopefully working together in a partnership.
Yes, that's absolutely great. That's where the magic happens. So, and I think that's also what I love working, why I love working in-house is because of this close relationship. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And so you talked about all your travels and I know I'm kind of envious about all the countries you've visited. How many so far? You can give us a
I'm
count?
right around 100. There's a
100.
we'll not go into all the details of whether I may or may not have legally entered a country or not to make it 100, but 100
Wow.
counting that one. Otherwise, I'm right on the cusp of 99. Yeah.
Incredible, incredible. So IP is a highly international field, right? How has working globally shaped your worldview? Although I think you were quite international and also interested in the world naturally, but how has it changed your worldview? And what tips do you have for people who want to collaborate effectively, across culture?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like the world is big and the world is small at the same time. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges. There is so much competition and so much similarity amongst, in different countries. And so, it can be hard to find a niche or break into a market when it's already saturated with very similar brands. And, obviously before the internet, like lots of brands popped up that were very similar in different jurisdictions and now they're running into each other. So it's always a challenge to work across borders and to try to figure out where those boundaries are. But at the end of the day, like people are all very similar. We all have the same challenges and the same interests. It can be a challenge to work through, but at the end of the day, I think people are people and markets are surprisingly similar. And so it's just kind of finding those similarities and then working out where those little differences might slow down processes and having conversations sometimes, explaining like, your perspective. I find like getting out of the email and onto a phone call and actually talking to people is very helpful, especially internationally. I find it just very interesting how small the world has gotten.
Sure. But I think it comes to you quite easily given how many cultures you've experienced and how many cultures you know. So I think it's always obviously a great icebreaker, like as you said earlier, right? Choosing IP was perfect for you, so you keep having this international exposure
Yeah.
constantly. So no, it's great. So now we're going to pivot a bit on an IP challenge, maybe that where you had to be extremely creative. What was the creative insight and what made a difference, right? Because it'd be interesting to see in practice how it could look like if you have an example to share.
Yeah, probably one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my at least recent career is at Target about 10 years ago, we immensely expanded our own brand portfolio. So we introduced about 40 new own brands within a 3-year-ish time period. And so that was like 15 brands a year that we were developing. And when I say brands, like these are like, I think the smallest brand when it was launched was about a $300 million business onto itself. They're really big brands. And doing that in a very short period of time. When we're talking about developing, it's not just the brand name, it's, the look and feel, but it's also the products. Target does a lot of its design in-house. So a large portion of the products are unique to Target, developed by our internal resources. And so clearing all of those from, a copyright and patent perspective, as well as just, making sure that it fits the unique look and feel of the brands that we're developing and that they're differentiated from one another and moving super fast. So that was a whole lot to keep in line. And my least favorite parts about being a trademark attorney is I feel like I'm always a dream killer, right? Somebody comes up with this great idea, they're all excited about it, and you have to be like, actually can't quite do that. And, have to kind of change course sometimes. And when you're trying to do 15 brands at once in 1 year, that's a lot of no's that get said, right? I mean, so trying to keep the morale of the team up and again, going back to being a good partner and working through those with them. But when it's such a concentrated, massive project like that can get really draining and trying to keep, that morale up and kind of keep the business moving. So we really focused on being present with our business partners, sitting in the room with them, doing real-time clearance searches so that we could actually guide the creative process if they're
Mm-hmm.
going down a channel that we know isn't going to ultimately be fruitful. Redirecting them, giving them 3 or 4 options that they can try to focus on that might fit what they're looking for to keep the business moving, making sure that they're not spinning their wheels and doing a bunch of work that they don't need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a big undertaking, but it was ultimately super successful. I have very close relationships with everybody that we worked with on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you're in the trenches, right? You do
Yes,
this
yes,
hard
yes.
work and you come out of it kind of battle scarred, but very close knit because of it. So they ultimately became some of my best partners that I still work with today. I just have a very easy relationship because of that work.
That is quite a challenge for those who don't know what it takes. Thanks for sharing that. And definitely something that is not always done. I'm sure that maybe some others have done it if there's a need for pressing clearances. What has been your toughest challenge as an IP lawyer? And what did it teach you about, the work, or maybe yourself? If you had some kind of, I don't know, quite a challenge that you could share with us, obviously.
I mean, I don't know that it's anything specific, in terms of a specific project, but I think just in general, as my career has progressed, particularly the internet. I mean, I'm getting old, right? The internet was just, internet sales and things like that were just coming on board when I was starting out and app shopping and all of that. The market has just become so saturated. And it's from the start of my career to now, watching it ramp up to where everybody has an online marketplace or they're selling t-shirts or they're selling water bottles and just trying to find a unique name that you can actually own in this highly saturated environment and explaining to your businesses, how that impacts their work because they don't always see how much protection there is around all these different terms. They just want to do business and sell products, right? And so trying to manage the business through that, but also just figuring out how to deal with all of these very complicated, very saturated markets. And it's not just one country, right? It's all countries. So you might find something that works in the US and then trying to find something that also works in 10 other countries is a challenge. And then how do you work the business through if you can't have the same mark across,
Yeah.
you know, jurisdictions? What do you do to make a cohesive brand where you might have to have a different name? And that's just gotten worse and worse. And I don't know that there's any, I think we're all struggling with that right now. There's not a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
answer, but it's
No.
something we all have to deal with.
Yes, absolutely. No great answer to that one for sure. What is one misconception about our field? that you'd love to correct once and for all?
I think that it does just go back to like the lawyers always being, just very buttoned up and all about the law, especially in our field. It's so creative and it's so entwined with business. I think I touch every part of the business. There's an IP aspect to everything that a company does, right? The misconception is maybe just that we're super siloed and we're only looking at the legal issues and that we're, very strict and whatever. Obviously, you have to work within the confines of the law, but it's such a gray area with IP, right? There's no black and white really. I mean, it's around the edges and trying to figure out like you're in the mind of consumers, right? Which is a hard place to play sometimes. And so we're like here to be problem solvers more than anything. And it's not like a yes and no answer. There's no black and white. It's always a conversation. And I think just getting people to come to us with those questions, not hide them because they think they're going to get a no or they're not going to be able to do what they want. We're really here to be partners. We're not here to just be like the answer from on high.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's definitely a common thread in our discussion today. I think starting with, at the very beginning, leadership style, business partnership, and ultimately, yes, having the business understand that we're here for them and that we can collaborate and be creative. So now pivoting to the value of maybe IP and a brand. And now that you've been working in this field, it's been not too, maybe 19 years now, is your perspective on what gives brand real value today? And maybe culturally, but also economically, and in the context of, IP as well, how IP shapes that value and the work that we do shape that value.
So much of it's become commoditized, right? I mean, this goes back to everybody having their own little online marketplace. It's so easy to find products. Everybody's selling things. There's so many online platforms. There's so many retailers. And so at the end of the day, if you want to build market share, it's really about the experience that you're providing to your guests, right? And so you want to have what's the reason to be? Why are people going to buy from you when they have 10 other options? And that comes down to a lot, I think, about the brand, right? It's like, what's the experience that you have from the second that you encounter a brand? Are they high quality? Is it just something cheap, or are you looking for something that's, going to have this higher end experience? You're going to have good customer service. You're going to be cared for. If something goes wrong, that you're going to be taken care of on the back end. Like all of that goes into driving consumer behavior. And so brand becomes really important because that's the face of all of these services that you're offering. That's what consumers think about when they think about what purchasing options they're going to have. And so making sure that you're protecting those assets so that somebody isn't using it and, diluting your goodwill, and that you really are controlling the quality of the products and services that you're offering, and that it's representing you in the way as a business that you want to be represented to your consumers, and then making sure that you're using it yourself consistently, right? I mean, all of these things that go into this brand experience, and that's what really drives value. And it's not always high value. Like obviously there's a place for all levels, but making sure that you are playing in the level that you want to play, where your customers are at, and you're meeting their needs, and you're being consistent and providing them with what they're ultimately looking for from you. And that's like what we do every day is, the business sees a little part of of the work, right? And we're sort of the institutional knowledge. We have the brands, we kind of know everywhere where our brands are playing, and we can make sure that across the company and across all of our countries that we're in, that we're offering this very consistent experience so that no matter where you encounter our brands, you're encountering them in the same consistent way and getting what you're expecting out of us. So I think that's the best way to keep businesses on track.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And now moving on to maybe the future lens, how we look at the future. How do you see the world of brands and IP evolving? And what do you think the next big legal or strategic challenge for the industry will be? Obviously, AI, everybody's talking about AI, but maybe you'll speak about AI, but, maybe there is even something else that, we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, AI is just to start there is a huge challenge. I mean, partially just who owns what these, AI language models are coming up with. I mean, there's so many different ways to use it. And like the input that you put in, keeping it proprietary, making sure that you're not letting your ideas out into the world that are going to be then put into these other large language models that other people can pull from. I do think it's going to be harder and harder to differentiate, right? Because you have creative teams that are all putting the same, you have a trend that comes up, say, and you're all putting in the same input to kind of come up with a name or an idea around this trend that's developing. Well,
Mhm.
if everybody's putting the same input in, everybody's going to be getting the same input out, and it's going to all start to look the same. And so I think trying to figure out how to differentiate and make sure that you're not relying on that too much. Like at the end of the day, you still need to have a person behind those ideas that is keeping the brand in mind and like remaining true to that identity that we talked about and making it unique and ownable. And you might have a trend, but putting your own unique spin on it is going to be super important. And also just for ownership, honestly, like if you're relying on computers to come up with all these ideas, do you really own it? Like, right, you want to be able to maintain that ownership, and there has to be some human element behind it for that to be the case. I also think like, as things are globalizing, it's getting easier and easier to buy products across borders. Things are being purchased through apps, through social media, and like that can also get away from you pretty easily. Once things are on social media and people are sharing, you've got influencers and all of these different things coming together that
Mhm.
influence the brand and what it
Yeah.
looks like to the public. It gets harder and harder to control. And so I think just again, maintaining that ecosystem and making sure that the brand is used consistently across all these different platforms that are emerging and constantly changing. I mean, throughout a year, like even just social media, if you look at how that changes over the course of a year, the way you appear needs to change. But still maintain that essential consistency that is the brand.
Yes.
It's going to be challenging, I think, and it's only getting faster and faster. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that perspective. If you had to sum up the value of your work as a brand IP lawyer, in one sentence, what would it be?
well, I will go to something that I hear from, for better or worse, from people a lot, which is, oh, you don't sound like a lawyer, or you don't seem like a lawyer to me. And I think at the end of the day, and this sort of ties back a lot of what we've been talking about, to me, I take it as a compliment, right? Because I don't want to be the big, bad, scary lawyer in the room, right? I want to be the partner that's going to work you through these problems. Like we can have an open, honest dialogue. And at the end of the day, get to the best solution for you as a business partner, for the business as a whole, and for our guests, right? And so kind of having that open personality that's open to collaboration that people want to work with, I think that's the unique value that I bring. I'm hopefully seen as a good partner and a problem solver and somebody that people are willing and maybe even excited to bring their problems to so that we can work together and ultimately come up with what's best for the business.
Yeah. We will have to survey your colleagues. And I'm sure that the IP issues you deal with are super interesting and exciting. So I've always said to myself, it's always good to have that experience of retailer experience because you have to look at things very differently from someone like me who's worked mostly for brands selling to retailers. Although you're an interesting case because your company does both. You have your own products and you sell other, third party products. Very interesting career and work. I'm really happy you joined me and that we heard about you and the way you work, who you are. Thank you so much, Renee.
Yeah.
And I wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It was great having a conversation with you today.
Thank you.